Welcome, everyone, for another episode of the Motherload. I am so happy that you are continuing to join us from wherever you're joining us from. And you're in for a treat today with Lyndsay Macpherson. We are going to have a casual and lovely conversation. I just know it. As most of you know who have been to the Motherload continually, and if this is your first month joining us, I welcome you. But these conversations, oh, they always end up at a heartfelt point. And I know that you will get something out of today, no matter where it happens to go for Lyndsay and I. So, Lyndsay, I would love it if you could give us a little introduction.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name's Lyndsay Macpherson, and I'm a mom of two. I have a daughter who is 4 and another little one, a daughter who is 2. I'm married. My husband and I live on an acreage in Saskatchewan, and my work is as a life coach and educator online for moms. And primarily, the areas that I focus on are around anger and triggers and sensuality for moms. I love the work I do. It's so fun. I really like working with helping moms explore like what are the things that we're triggered by, because that's the one thing I think in motherhood was I was like unprepared for, was the amount of times that I would be triggered. Um Thinking that it was like what was on the surface, but then when I started to explore and reflect and dive deeper, I was like, holy smokes, these triggers are packing a lot of stuff behind them. So I help moms work through their triggers to see what's underneath, really from an embodied space. I spent years of my life completely cut off and disconnected from my body. And motherhood has forced me to come back into my body to really regulate my nervous system, feel my emotions in my body, get out of my head or use my head when it's like useful, but not when it's so harmful. But yeah, that's the work I do. Mostly is around anger, triggers, sensuality, boundaries, limits, all the good stuff that we are forced to learn in motherhood, whether we like it or not.
Yes,
Yeah.
so much. I actually just asked a question of this. When you watch this, it will have been weeks ago, but
Yeah.
but just on the weekend around, what are the things that no one told you about motherhood?
Yeah, I saw that you shared that.
And one of the answers that I got back was really profound. And she actually wouldn't mind me sharing this because she was episode 3 of the Motherload. So it was Jessica. And she shared with me that motherhood would bring about a forcefulness to deal with the things that she always left or
Yeah,
ignored or pretended was okay. And motherhood made it not okay anymore. And
totally.
and really um awoke this sense in her that like I'm not going to stand for this stuff anymore. And
Yeah,
this is where I need to go, and these people, these things, these habits, these patterns, like no more.
yeah. Yeah, I was just writing about that this morning as I'm in the midst of running my One Angry Mama course and then having it start up again. And when people come to my work, they're like so fired up about their kids and they're so fired up about their partners. And I get it because I lived in like a fired up, resentful space for like a decade of my relationship. Where I was in that space, I would say at least half or the majority of the time. But it's like really coming to that space of like your kids and your partner or anyone in your world, really, they're just bringing to the surface the things that you're ready to deal with, to transform, to feel, to validate. Um, and I think that we would have greater capacity for that if we were told that. Like if we were told that and other mothers modeled that and said like there are really beautiful parts of it, but like you're not just birthing someone, you're rebirthing yourself. And like we need to know that because getting blindsided by that, I'm like, I'm not sure why we're getting blindsided by this. Like everyone knows that it's happening. But then I have to remember we've come from generations who just did the surf, they did what they could. They didn't dive deep. They didn't like say how they really felt. And I say that generally speaking, some of our parents' generation or grandparents' generation may have, but the large majority hasn't. And so now our generation's like realizing like how the unhealthy ways we've been parented, the ways that we were taught unhealthiness in relationships. And then it's like we have this like widened lens and like just, I don't know. There's a lot for moms right now because our awareness and the education and the research is so vast.
Yeah.
But then we're one person. And I mean, for the last year and a like motherhood in general has been done in isolation for a long time, but then for the last year and a half for a lot of us it's like really extremely isolating. And so to think that we're going to fix and heal and do all these things like hard stop on them, I actually like have thought about that lately. I'm like, I don't actually think it's possible. Like I know for me, and I mean I'm very committed to my own healing, a healthy family, healthy relationship with my partner. I won't heal everything. My kids have already got stuff passed along from me and it sucks, but I'm also like, look where I came from and look where I am now. So I mean, I'll hear about it from them when they're in their 20s,
Right?
teens, but I'm
Yeah.
like, whatever. I'm like, we've done a lot of work to shift things
Absolutely.
up. So it's a big load.
It is. Yeah. So on that note, we're here to talk about the mother load and the weight of all of that. Lyndsay, can you give us some context just around some of the heaviest parts for you? You mentioned work in your relationship, your work as a mother, managing some of those triggers. Can you give some context around that?
Yeah, so my mother load, like what it looks like personally is, I mean, I'll go from the nearest future, but in the last year, I've started my year and a half, I've started my own business. So that's been an added load. And that was all choice. Like I wanted to do that. I'm happy I did it. But there's a lot that like becoming a mom, there's a lot with starting your own business that it's like I said yes to this, but I didn't know that there was going to be all of those things. So holy shit. Um, so that is a big load that's on my plate right now, but I love my work. So that like it's life giving, but there's still energy output and time. Um, and then navigating a relationship when you don't have the space or the time that you may want to like to give that relationship or give that partner or have that person give you. And then also realizing that like we don't know how to relationship healthy and in high functioning ways. A lot of us are really learning that without the space and time and support to learn it. So that can feel like a load. But that being said, I do feel like this current season of life, we're in that space of like rhythm where there are other seasons of life where Scott and I are just like, we are not moving to the beat of the like, or same beat, like we are on totally different pages. And so, but right now I feel like we've kind of hit a point and then we're coming out of that point, so that I'm super grateful for that season. But also part of that load is honoring that we are going to cycle through seasons, and I don't think that I understood that in motherhood, that some seasons would feel like so easy and so like, oh, I'm so confident, everything's just like clicking, and then some seasons are like really freaking hard. Another part of our mother load is that, or my mother load is that my kids have never been great sleepers. I think that there's a lot of reasons behind that we don't have to get into here. That's a whole nother conversation, but they've never slept great. So a large portion of my motherhood experience has been sleep deprived. And that's been something I didn't expect, and something that I've had to do a lot of like work around. So the work that I do on like regulating my nervous system and like emotional intelligence and communication and like intimacy and connection, it's like some days it's like it feels like I'm doing that in quicksand. Like it's like I know the things, but I'm like I'm just so damn tired.
Mhm.
So that's a big part of my mother load. And then one of the, I would say, the most kind of heartbreaking and like heavy parts of my mother load is that I had significant childhood trauma. And I think that a lot of people have, like I have met very few people who haven't, like and I guess to context that, how I describe trauma and the people that I study and learn trauma from, it's like anything that's too much, too fast, too soon, and too overwhelming for your system. And so I knew, and I always describe my childhood as having like lots of dysfunction in it. But it was pretty normal dysfunction,
Mm.
like for our society. And definitely it was like quite normal dysfunction for our community. But only since I became a mother did I actually feel the depth of that trauma and actually the impact and start to actually say, okay, well, what would that experience have been like as Lyndsay when I was like 3 or 2 or 1 or 7 or 12? And then where I was thinking that, oh, I had just like a dysfunctional, but like not bad childhood, I was like, oh my God, I actually had like trauma all throughout my childhood and teenage years. And then, of course, into adulthood because I didn't have the tools or capacity to heal what I needed to at that young age. And so I was not expecting that because that stuff all comes to the surface. So when I'm like triggered by my kids or my partner and get really overwhelmed or really flooded or my nervous system gets really activated, it's like that's not because of me who I am now and my kids who they are and how they're showing up. That's because of like all the trauma
Mm.
and the dysregulated nervous system I'm carrying from my childhood. So I wasn't expecting that. And that's been like, and like I heard something over the weekend and it was like, we have to like go through this pain to like heal and awaken. And I'm like, I don't know, like I get that, but I'm like, I really hope we're coming into like a season in our lifetimes of like, can't we learn to love ourselves and know ourselves through love, not through like so much
Mhm.
pain? And so yeah, I wasn't expecting that. Like that's been hard for me of like when I look at like how anger and reactivity and just such like dysregulation and struggle to be present with my kids in the past and even at times now when I think about how that comes up and I know that the connection is related to my own childhood, that's been really heartbreaking and really frustrating because it's like I want better for them, but I'm like I also have to honor my starting place. Like I didn't have the childhood that is our birthright when we come into this world, and a lot of people didn't. And so, yeah, so that's how I ended up doing the work that I do, is because I had to figure out how to heal and get the supports with healing and taking care of myself. And I was just like, we need to be talking about
Mm.
this stuff because I think for me, it was like I always felt like there was something wrong with me when I was mad or I was upset or I was super dysregulated or struggled to be present. And I was like, or would say yes to things and then be mad and resentful because I said yes. And then I was like, the more that I learned about trauma and the more that I learned about like how much our childhood and our intergenerational stuff affects us now, I'm like, oh my God, this is not me. And there's something wrong with me. This is like part of the mother load that I think every mother is really carrying right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
good
And
times.
and I recently watched a webinar from an OB in the States, and I probably mentioned her before in other conversations, but she's talking a lot right now about the millennial parent problem and how millennial parents really struggle to be present and to feel joy, to set boundaries. And she's got another thing. But anyway, and she talks about that this isn't a you thing. Like
Yeah,
this isn't you. This is culture, this is society, this is you,
yeah,
this is your family, this is your genetics. Like just this isn't
totally.
just you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But then remembering for me, it's coming back to, but that, and it's not that it's a you thing, but it's like, okay, so, but what do I have power over?
Mhm.
What, like, what am I going to change up? Like, what am I? And that's where I've had to get really like, I have to get really compassionate and really loving and really kind with myself. But then part of like reparenting and mothering myself is also a bit of firmness for myself of like, get your ass to bed. And then
Yes.
I was actually talking about that on my Instagram stories because I stayed up so late last night and my kids are really early risers, like 5 a.m. isn't uncommon. And Claire was up, sure enough, and it was my turn to get up with her, and it was like I slept like 3.5, maybe 4 hours, and I was
Mhm.
like, fuck, what the fuck? Like, I don't want to do this. And I instantly went into that thought of like, I'm so mad at her and I'm so pissed off at her. And then I was like, no, what I'm actually mad about is that I wasn't honoring my boundaries and limits last night. And so, but that how that roots and connects back is like, well, of course we don't honor our boundaries and limits well, because they weren't honored for most of us when we were in our childhood. So it's like actually isn't like second nature for me to like honor my boundaries and take care of myself really well. For the majority of my life, I've been encouraged to like not honor my boundaries, to ignore my limits, to say yes when I wanted to say no, to be compliant, to be easy, to not rock the boat. So it's like we're undoing that stuff as we yeah, mother our kids and remother and parent ourselves. It's
Mhm.
crazy. It's
Mhm.
crazy, but it's liberating when you start to feel progress and you start to feel growth. It's like this morning I started to get pissed off at Claire because I was like, why is she always getting up so early and her
Right.
sleep sucks, and really going down that rabbit hole of victimization. And then I was like, well, no, you had some choice in this. Like you could have went to
Mhm.
bed at 10, 10:30 at the latest. You could have gone to bed earlier if you didn't shower and blow dry your hair. So I was like, I made some choice here. And that to me is like recognizing that pattern and stopping it and then not being shitty to her. It's like, no, I made my bed. I'm going to lie in it. And like, I can still have a good day, even though I'm tired. I don't have to suck out or be a victim or like blame everybody else and be mad all day. Although I've had those days too, but they're few and far between because I'm undoing those patterns that have been just, they're so deeply ingrained in us.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I watched the Gaber Mate's The Wisdom of Trauma yesterday.
Yeah.
It's free until today, June 14th today. I
Yeah.
think he's probably gonna monetize it after that.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And
I'm
there's
sure.
a course that goes with it.
Yeah.
And I was checking that out. But anyway, there's a whole unit on victimization.
Yeah.
And I know that you and I have had some candid conversations about victimizing in our own motherhood and how we
Yeah.
kind of unknowingly, unintentionally
Yeah.
victimize ourselves
Totally.
in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Like we've been conditioned to think that we have no power and that everybody else has to change. And it's only until everybody else changes, then we'll feel good and then we'll feel okay. And I don't I don't I don't disagree that there's certain things that have to change, but when we're trying to change everybody else, our partners, our kids, our world around us, well, we're trying to force all of that to change or them to change, but we're doing it from a wounded space. We're trying to fix things through like really dirty scratched glasses. Like we're healing, trying to control them
Mm.
from a wounded perspective. So it just feels gross and unaligned. And so a lot of my healing journey has been having to take a lot of responsibility of like, you know, my kids do something, my partner does something, it triggers something in me. The go to, and this is conditioning, is like, they made me mad. They didn't do this. This happened. So now I have to deal with blah, blah, blah. And we go down this, like, it's like this, we start to ruminate. It's a spiral of victimization. And how I came to understanding I was a victim was like 12-step recovery. I was in Al Anon years ago. And I remember being so horrified. I was like, I am not a victim. But when I looked at all the ways every single day that I was giving my power away and giving my peace and like serenity away to everybody else, I was like, I am like the token victim here. And so a lot of us who have been victimized in our past, we actually carry on that pattern of victimizing ourselves. And so that doesn't mean, and I've talked with you about this too, and in my work, it doesn't mean that our partners don't need to change
Oh,
and
yeah.
things outside of us don't have to change. But the work that I share and the work that I hold myself accountable to do as well is that I've got to first look to see what that triggered in me, and I have to first feel the emotions around that. Otherwise, I'm coming to my kids and my partners from often a controlling and manipulative place where I'm trying to avoid the vulnerability and feelings that they've triggered in me.
Mhm.
And that's hard for us to hear. And I remember working with a healer years ago. She did body talk. And I was like, how can you not see that my sister, this person is the problem? They are clearly the problem. And she was just kept redirecting me back to myself. And I was like, fuck you. Like, I was so furious because the whole world will support you in victimization.
Yes.
The whole world will. The person at the coffee shop will, your girlfriends will, your mother will, everybody will. But I didn't need that. I had been heard and I'd still been complaining about the same goddamn things for so many years. And she was trying to give me a path out, but I had a lot of internal resistance because I was like, but they are so obviously the problem.
Yes.
Like my kids' sleep is so obviously the problem, but it's like, but there's so much that's brought up in me that I've had to work through and deal with and figure out, and action that I've had to take, that it's like, I don't love that she doesn't sleep, but I can still, I can still do what I need to do day to day, regardless of how she sleeps. Some days it's different because of
Mhm.
lack of sleep or sleep interruption, but yeah, we like, victimization is like, people don't want to hear it, and
Mhm.
they need to hear it because it's your way out. If everybody else has the power, then you're sitting there waiting for my partner to change. I tried to get Scott to change for a decade. Scott started to change when I started to do the inner work, and
Mhm.
then it wasn't through me badgering him, but that doesn't mean I don't have boundaries. But now he knows my boundaries aren't coming from a manipulative and controlling place.
Right. Yeah.
So
I
it's
remember I remember so vividly sitting in the couples therapy office when I started my business. This was probably 4 years ago now. Yeah, when my son is 6 and he was 2. Um, and I so badly wanted my husband to be the problem. I
yeah,
was like, he's the angry one. He had his part to play. Like, he's not getting off scot free here. He had some work to do. But I so badly wanted him to be the problem. And then one session where, so the therapist that we go to like sees us together and then once separate and then together again, just to like
right.
check on our individual progress.
Yeah,
And it had been in one of our couple sessions when we were together, and the therapist said to me, well, tell me a little bit about what takes up most of your headspace. And there was a big piece in there that was mine to take responsibility for, and I was the only person who could change it. And I just kept saying no, but this is just my reality. Like, I can't control any part of this piece of my pie chart. And he was like, no, like, there's boundaries that need to be set there, and this piece of your pie chart is now infiltrating your marriage, and
yeah,
that's where the discomfort and that's where the anger is coming from, because my
yeah,
husband is very good at setting boundaries, almost to the other opposite extreme.
yeah,
And my boundaries were super porous and his were rigid, and we needed to kind of like come together. But
yeah,
my therapist was like, no, Kayla, this is not his problem, this is your problem.
yeah,
You need to fix this, and these are the scripts and these are the ways that you can do that.
yeah,
But this piece of your pie chart is not going to change until you command that this is what you want your life to be like.
yeah.
And it was like, holy crap, like, I did not think, truly, when I walked into that office, I
Totally.
thought he was going to say, and you need to go to anger management and you're fine. Right. And I was like, oh, damn it, get to the office and here I am, part of the problem. Fuck.
Which sucks. It's so
Yes.
humbling and like mortifying in the experience. In the moment, you're like, what? Especially if it's your first, like, kind of like realization to it. It's like, what? But it's like you put on different clear glasses, and then it's so liberating though, and empowering, because it's like, okay, well, now I can actually change how I feel
Mhm.
without trying to manage and control everybody else, which is actually super exhausting. And the other thing I'll say to that is, I see this all the time with clients coming into my One Angry Mama work when we start to talk about boundaries is they have no boundaries for themselves and they don't respect anyone else's boundaries.
Anybody else's.
Like none.
Yeah.
And I was saying this to a mom recently. I was like, if you are like, if your husband is like, I'm not hearing this anymore, and you still want to talk about it and like make him responsible for your emotions and your feelings and to understand you, and he is clearly like, he might not explicitly be saying no, but he is not engaging in that conversation or he's shutting you down. You are not respecting his boundaries either. And I've had a ton of boundary violations on Scott that we're healing and repairing from because he's more passive and I'm actually more sympathetic dominant. So I'm more quick to react, quick to like assert, but I grew up in like you needed to like be quick thinking and you needed to be scanning for threats and you need to figure out how to protect yourself, and you protect yourself and push people away before you get hurt. And so I've had some like brutal like things that I like, just like pushing people away who genuinely love me and I can trust and that I am safe with. But he's not super on of like calling me out on it, but he's getting better at it. And it's so good to be called out on it because it's like when someone truly loves us and we can look at those parts of ourselves that are doing that like dysfunctional or like I say dysfunctional, but it's like they're harmful habits and they're hurtful habits to us and other people, but they served a purpose to protect us in our childhood. Like they're not, I'm not overreactive or like triggered or like, protect, like that part of me served a purpose. It helped me survive my childhood and my life until I could learn better. And so now I'm just learning that it's like, okay, well, what does that part of me need to feel safe
Mhm.
so that I can like be vulnerable with him to say, like, you know what, I'm like making this about what you're not doing, but I'm actually just feeling really scared right now. And
Mhm.
that's super vulnerable because if you said anything vulnerable in my family of origin, you just get like, boom, the hammer. Like, people, like, if you had a weakness, people would like take advantage of that big time. So you didn't show any.
Mhm.
So I've had to really like soften. That's why for me, so my healing is like anger and sensuality and sexuality, which to some people might be like, that's so bizarre. They're opposite spectrums. But when we have a lot of anger and resentment and frustration and passive aggressiveness and resentment and all that grossness and activation, we're often like deficit in sensuality and sexuality and intimacy and play and connection. And so I didn't know that when I first started getting into both, but now I'm like, oh, I can totally see how these are so interwoven. But that sensual part and that sexual part and that playful part, that's super vulnerable for a lot of us. Like you were saying, that woman was saying, like it's hard for a lot of us to just feel safe and okay being present.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Lyndsay, can you share with us some of your regular practices that you use in your life to regulate yourself and create that emotional intelligence and safe, communication and boundaries in your relationship?
Yeah, I would say I have myself surrounded by people now who like friendship relationships who would hold me accountable. So if I just called them and was like bitching and complaining about Scott and Scott's the problem, they'd hear me, but like they also would like ask me about how I'm feeling and like what this is bringing up in me. So they wouldn't like the people that I'm around, like I surround myself with people who will like stretch me to like actually see into my heart and hold space for like what I'm feeling. So that's helpful, but I also have a really strong expectation for myself that like yes, I'm carrying a lot from my childhood and my life up to this point, but like it's not okay for me to like continue to harm
Mm.
like my kids and my partner or our relationships because I experienced that pain. Like I know it's vulnerable to heal and I know it's hard to heal and like it's super easy to just go down those old reactive patterns, but I've just started to like demand and expect more from myself of like it's important for me that I show up more. And I also expect that from my clients. So I want to be also working through that. Sleep is really critical for me. Like, honestly, it's funny. People will be like, what are all the things that you do to heal? And I'm like, the basics. I drink water. I eat, relatively well most of the time. I try to get as much sleep as I can. I foster my creativity. And I mean, that's something that I am always so inspired by in the work that you do is like I'm playing with oil pastels and I have my little drum and like reconnecting to that play and like scheduling and having pleasure and intimacy and connection with myself and my partner. But it's not crazy. Like I work with coaches sometimes and healers and therapists, and sometimes I don't. I do the work myself. But it's like it's just really basics. It's like being honest with my husband of like, when I'm being manipulative, it's like, I'm actually being manipulative right now. Like just owning that. It's like we're
Mhm.
all doing it.
Yeah.
I had a client once say to me, it was so funny. She said to me the one time, she was like, when my partner does this, I I make them think that like I'm hurt, so I'm like make them think it's about them and what they did wrong. And I was like, yeah, welcome to being human. Everybody does that. A lot of people aren't aware of it, or if we're aware of it, it's still really vulnerable to
Mhm.
say like how we're truly feeling. But yeah, I do breath work. I meditate when I make time for it or I can. I've been on a really stagnant spree of like not really journaling or writing lately. Um, but I also like I usually my kids go to bed anywhere between 7:30 and 9. I usually go to bed then and then I'm up at 5 and they can be up at 5. So I schedule my stuff in between my work. That's most ideal for me on breaks and lunches. Like that's when I walk, that's when I go outside. Going outside for me is like really, really therapeutic, like being in nature, especially out of the city. But yeah, just kind of the basics, not anything too crazy. I do a lot actually, the one thing I'll say is I do a lot of somatics of like coming into the body,
Mhm.
feeling my emotions here, getting out of here and like growing my capacity to be in here. That's one thing that I do spend a lot of time with.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. I always feel like the solutions are way less complicated than we think they need to be.
Totally.
Just even a few weeks ago, I found myself in a bit of a cycle that I don't enjoy. And um, someone just reminded me, they were like, just get outside,
Yeah.
just like stop and have a glass of water, and it's not that those things are the magic solution. It doesn't take that pattern away, or it doesn't, any of that. But I find that as soon as I come back to here, that some of those things, they just get a little less intense,
Yeah.
because I can hear my voice, I can think about, water or nature or my breath,
Yeah.
as the catalyst, to
Yeah.
moving out of that pattern, or getting the confidence to say something, or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just find that sometimes it is just that simple. And actually, the documentary that I watched yesterday too was like, there were a couple of moments in the documentary about trauma where people were like, "Oh, it's that simple. It's like it's just that simple of talking kinder to myself, or
Yeah.
giving myself compassion, giving
Yes,
other people compassion."
totally.
Or
Connecting with others.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had a really brutal week dropping, my kids off at daycare. I can't remember, it was just a rough morning, and my girlfriend just randomly called, and I talked to her for, like, an hour just about the, like, heaviness around it and how I was feeling and just, like, the stuff we're talking about and, like, what we're carrying as moms, and it just changed my day, like, literally changed my day, and it reminded me of, like, "Okay, I need to, like, plan connection because when I start to not have connection and I feel alone in motherhood or I feel alone in my relationship, that's when things start to get dicey because that's where shame can come up when we have hard days or moments. But when I share it with my girlfriend and she's like, "Oh yeah, like that was like our whole last week and like this
Right.
is what I did and like you're good, like you'll bounce back. What do you need?" And it often exactly is what you said. It's coming back to basics, slowing my breath down, drinking water, moving my body, dancing to music. Like there are some deeper healing that I've had to do and, that I definitely walk clients through. But a lot of it is just like intention, mindful intention and basics daily. And then when you get off track, it's like, okay, well, what worked before? And how can I just like come back on and get back on the rails? So, yeah,
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for
yeah,
sharing that with us. I'm
yeah,
gonna share one more story and then we're going to close up our conversation. I
sure.
remember I was texting Lyndsay once about a difficult situation I was having with my older child. And the question that you asked with me has really stuck. And you asked me, in what ways are you repressing your own emotions and not
Yeah,
allowing your own feelings? Because the behavior that he's mirroring back to you would be that, I can't help but speculate that that's what's happening.
yeah,
And I was like, in the moment when I read your text, I was like, it's not me. Not me. This is like, he's 6. Like, logically, I'm like, it's not him. Definitely our kids can be triggering and they can have their own packages and their own stuff. But actually, since you said that to me, it's been like a repetitive statement in my head, like, how am I repressing my emotions today?
yeah,
Because that's my baseline. My baseline is repression, and
yeah,
feelings are not okay. They won't be accepted. You won't be validated. You won't, like, that's the
yeah,
narrative.
totally.
And so I have really appreciated that. And if I
Yeah,
can second what you said there about surrounding yourself with people who will push you towards that growth, who will gently and lovingly and compassionately, guide you there, or command that you command more of yourself.
yeah.
It can be really, really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you were open to that. That question can shut some people down from ever talking to me again because we don't want to see that it's us. But
Mhm.
I think you spoke to that so eloquently is that the reason why we don't want to see it's us is because we often have wounding around there's something wrong with me, and if it's like I don't want there to be something wrong with me, because if there's something wrong with me or I'm doing something wrong, then I'm going to be rejected, I'm not going to get love, I'm not going to have like we have a lot of wounding around that. And so I love that you were able to make that connection and to stick, because our kids mirror me. Like my
Oh,
kids
yeah.
not sleeping well and having like totally dialed nervous systems. I'm like, sorry, sorry about that.
Yeah,
I've done a lot of work, but like, you're going to learn regulation as I learned regulation because you didn't get the best start to it.
absolutely.
But
I
it's hard to own that because like we carry a lot of shame around that, and it's hard to heal it. Like, I don't know. I like to point those things out because it gives people a pathway out, but I also know that a lot of us have so much shame around our wrongness that people can like go down that pathway. So I'm glad we're still friends since for,
Yes.
since then. I
No,
never know.
it's absolutely necessary. And we were going down this path of like trying to figure out how to support him and his emotional regulation, and
Yeah,
getting all of these supports. And then there was just a breaking point for me, and I just said, I need to go back to therapy.
yeah,
I need to start addressing these things. One session, and this is like, I'm experienced in therapy. Like, I've been going
totally.
since I was
Yeah,
12. Like, it doesn't take many sessions for me to kind of like get back,
yeah.
in line. And one session, and pretty much all of his behaviors have like simmered. So
That's so
it's
beautiful.
totally me. Like, and I don't mean that I need to over responsibility myself for that. Like,
Totally. Yeah.
but another Gaber Mate, I'm reading his Scattered Minds on ADHD, and he
Me
talked
too.
about his highly sensitive daughter and how she was
Yeah.
like the barometer for the
Yeah.
stress in their household. And that is my oldest. He is the barometer for stress. And so as soon as he starts exhibiting like really aggressive screamo kind of behaviors,
Yeah.
we now know as parents that we need to dial it back. We need to do more
Yeah.
connection, we need to do more play, we need to
Yeah.
be more present.
Yeah.
And intentionally present, not just like I'm going to sit here and ignore you while you play, which also has its place sometimes, but like
Yeah.
I'm going to be here with you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like that if we can like like I'm just celebrating you so much for like using him and his behavior and the fluctuations as a like, okay, that's how we start to unpack. Like what's this mirroring? What's this showing off that's like a deeper issue? Because it's heartbreaking to see how much time and energy goes into fixing and controlling and changing kids when it's often starting with us, which doesn't mean that we don't need to get support for our kids. But if we're not looking inward, I say that and I'm always like, I mean, anyone that's coming to your work is has capacity and is doing inner work and looking inward. And so because in sometimes in some situations when the parent has no capacity to do any work, then I'm like, get the kid whatever support externally they
absolutely.
need, because it's like they need to survive that situation. And if that can be like the support or the landing space or like the safe space, then like get that support. But I have a girlfriend whose son is was recently in the last couple years diagnosed ADHD as well. And all the work from their therapist or the psychiatrist was everything was them. They didn't have to do the son doesn't have to do anything. The parents have to change everything. And it has made such dramatic improvements on the child and on the family. And so I love that you're like looking at those triggers with compassion and curiosity of like, well, what else is this telling us? Because I just think that's so brave and so courageous. I just love it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yay,
and absolutely. I think when the children need support, get them the support, right?
yeah,
But also in supporting a child, the people who they live with also have to be on board with some of
yeah,
the exercises or routines or patterns or that kind of thing. And so I think it's a holistic, a whole family culture kind
yeah,
of looking inward that
totally,
can really be empowering for people. Definitely, like there's schools of thought, where genetics are 100% at play and nurture is 100% at play. And, I think researchers are merging that it's not just one or the other. We can't think about humans outside of this like human experience. And
totally.
um, so definitely genetics, play a role in it. And sometimes it is the way that certain people are built.
Yeah,
But in our personal case, I know that it is that barometer. It's like
yeah,
that he is a walking temperature gauge, of what's happening in our world. So I
yeah,
really, really, really am grateful for you being here, Lyndsay,
yeah,
today and being open and vulnerable to this conversation. I know that our members are going to get something from this conversation today. And if anybody had any tingling or feeling of I need to get to know Lyndsay more, her links are going to be below. And I can personally attest to her friendship. I've not taken anything officially, but I can attest to just the way that she is and the way that she holds people, that it is an amazing work that she's doing. And if any of you are interested in anger or sensuality or any part of your being, that you can kind of see yourself in her work, please get in touch with her.
yeah. Reach out anytime. Thank you so much for having me, Kayla. And yeah, I was celebrating and honoring each of you for walking this path in motherhood. Sending you lots of love. It's fun to be in this space. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lyndsay. And I will see you all again soon.